making as many badass motherfuckers who understand the brilliance of being free emotionally, cognitively, physically, and then we build a society on that. No matter what you're going to be doing, you're going to be compromising. There's always going to be some sort of opportunity cost, because when we make decisions, we're leaving other good options on the table.
Every time you're doing something, you're not doing everything else in the entire world.
Absolutely. Recently, I was talking to someone about intuitive eating, and I go, well, I get it, but I also think that if you're 150 pounds overweight, that you may need to tune your intuition.
I intuitively eat. I don't recommend somebody who's 150 pounds overweight to intuitively eat.
Absolutely.
Because that's what they've been doing, and it's just cravings. And
well, it's hard to separate the intuitiveness from the cravings, from the desire, from the dopamine hijack. Imagine repping the statement, because of the government, I don't have the freedom I want to have, over and over and over. Well, guess what? That's hypnotization. You're going to hypnotize yourself to the point you believe that
you never will have the freedom.
Yeah, you never will.
Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Taylor Morgan. You like that?
I like it.
Yeah. We are at the lake house in Virginia. We're having a little enlifted gathering, a gathering of pirates. And with me, I have the co-founder of Enlifted, Mr. Adam Chin, who is a gangster. This man, a few nights ago, was walking around in a fur coat with that beanie on and shades on with disco music and lights going on in the background. And I look over and he's just massaging himself with two Theraguns, just living the dream.
Like an action movie, but with two Theraguns.
Yeah.
Right? On myself.
Pure pleasure.
Just pure.
Listen to the music.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we dive into today's episode, I want to give a quick word from our sponsors. First up, this episode is brought to you by Lambs, this EMF blocking shirt that I've got on now. How does it block EMFs? Well, it's made out of silver, which is not only antimicrobial, so you don't stink when you wear it, but it also protects you from the oxidative stress from the wavelengths that we're being exposed to right now from laptops, computers, Wi-Fi. So you can get the hookup on anything from Lambs at getlambs.com. Use code Captain Morgan. That will save you 10%. Next up, this episode is brought to you by HVMN and their new product, Ketone IQ. They're drinkable ketones. Have you had ketones before?
I have.
Would you like some?
Look at this.
Let's take some
Gifts
ketones.
Keep coming. Thank you.
Turn the brain on.
Turn the brain on. Shall we do it now?
Yeah, let's cheers.
Let's go. Cheers.
Energy for a good podcast. Tastes like rocket fuel because it is rocket fuel. This stuff, seriously, especially while fasted or after my morning coffee, just gets my brain just physical endurance too. So
I love it.
Yeah, good stuff. You can get the hookup at hvmn.com. Use code Captain Morgan 10. All right, that's it for the sponsors of today's show. Now we will have a conversation on freedom. So Adam Chin, this is a round two of the podcast, so we won't do a proper introduction. We'll just get right into it. So there's a pirate flag outside.
There is.
Waving in the wind. That brings me pure joy to understand what that represents and what everybody in this house understands: freedom and rebelling against the status quo that has been in place.
It brings you joy, you the captain. It brings you the person who wore the mask on the plane in the airport.
Did not wear the mask.
I'm sorry, did not until they put you in the incarceration. And yeah, of course you love the pirate flag. This is you. This is your people, man.
Yeah,
I could tell when you came in the door this time, where I saw you during this round. You were just fully relaxed. I could tell you felt that you were amongst friends.
Yes.
Was that an accurate reading?
Absolutely. That's interesting that you bring that up, because my energy absolutely is different when I'm around people who, at least it has been in the past. I imagine this is different now that I'm more confident and sure of myself. But yeah, in the past, in situations like that with people who I was kind of unsure of their vibe, it would be completely different than walking into a house like this. Like, everybody's on the same page.
Oh yeah, you were so relaxed, and you felt comfortable. This is my reading. I could tell you felt comfortable just doing your own thing, just fucking either going into a circle of being social, doing your own thing. It was bliss. I could feel the bliss coming off of you.
Yeah.
And how much of that do you think is this feeling of knowing you're around fellow freedom lovers, fellow pirates, people who've worked on themselves and are manipulating their worlds than their realities?
That plays a big role. It's, I think it's like half of that and half of me doing the work on myself.
Boom. That's going to be today's talk.
Okay.
Right?
Let's do it.
It's this, right? It's both.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah. If I hadn't have done all the work on myself, like understanding who I am,
Yes.
then even if you're around people who have done the work themselves, it's still an alien environment. You still kind of feel out of place. You're
Freedom within, freedom outside. Okay. There's a both major requirements, because we talked about it a little bit last night about our topic.
Mhm.
You see these people online that are big time libertarians. We got to change the government. We got to change all this stuff to make sure that, we're free. And then they're addicted to substances, or they have no idea how to be in a relationship with other people or themselves, and it's like, oh, great. You're going to have this free, anarcho-capitalist, utopia, but then you're also going to be miserable every single day of your life because you don't know how to do the work on yourself, right? So what good would a utopia, a pirate freedom loving utopia be without the work internally? I think that's a huge question, right?
Yeah. I think it's important for us to first define what we mean by pirate. Because I think a lot of people hear pirate and they're like, you guys are going around stealing and raping women and just plundering.
Hi, diddly dee. All Disney now.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Talk to us about what pirates actually stood for. Or of course there were the outliers who actually did, murder and rape and all that stuff. But pirates that we're referring to are a little bit different.
Well, we're talking about people outside of the general system of government and rules of life, and also culturally. So the thing about, you're aware of this, in our circle, we have we're very fortunate to have one of the co-authors of Be More Pirate, the book. She's in the Unlifted Circle and has done a lot of talks and seminars for our team. And, she talks a lot about how pirates had this unique culture within. They were, and culture is, the old Peter Drucker line, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Yeah. So culture is so important. So they were away from all that stuff. So how they integrated racially with women, a lot of these pirate ships were very progressive by, their standards of the day. It was also more of a, while there were captains, there were leaders, there were also more fluid levels of authority and leadership, and people had different roles they fulfilled. I'm thinking of some specific examples here, but before we get to that, I want to talk about more about how a pirate's culture informs how the pirate is. And I think the freedom that we're talking about with pirates is, again, it can devolve into chaos, devolve into anarchy with raping and pillaging and stealing. But we're talking more about being separate, taking ownership of who we are as a people. And to me, that's what defines pirate to me, is to be able to step out from the outside and that takes a lot of courage, by the way. These people had to, either they were so desperate that they left the old world behind, or they said, no, I'm going to be brave, just like the people, a lot of the pioneers that came to the New World. I'm going to set out on my own because I have to. It calls me. I mean, I'm sure this lifestyle has called you, Taylor. You weren't like, well, I could just sit back and get a job and work for, H&R Block. It's like you were like, no. I am called to do this. I'm called to keep doing this. So I think in a lot of ways, okay, here, I'll tie it up like this. A lot of ways, I think the pirates are our ancestors. And I think that's why we resonated. These are our predecessors,
Yeah. part of the ship, part of the crew. So you mentioned the diversity aspect, the different races, the women. It doesn't matter. Like if you're part of the ship, you're part of the crew. Like if you want freedom and you understand uh, these concepts of language, which we can absolutely get into, and understanding what it means to actually be free, which I want to define freedom because I imagine people have different definitions of what freedom actually is. So let's get into that. Let's get into the different levels of freedom because, like you were mentioning, you have, uh, well, politics is
Oh,
the you mentioned the libertarians in politics. That's not what we're talking about when we say freedom. Like if you're so set on any sort of dogmatic view and you're not open to other viewpoints, I don't believe that's freedom. Because even like in what we understand with language, like I always have an open mind, right? Like if there was if new information is new credible information is presented, I am open to changing my view or opinion on anything. I think a lot of people are so close-minded based on their programming, based on how they were raised, that they're trapped in this cage of their past beliefs and they're closed off to any sort of other possibilities. They're like, this is the way that it is, and this is the way that I've always lived. Right?
absolutely. Yeah, well, that rigidity, what, they say, what doesn't bend breaks. I mean, that echoes all the way from a personal relationship to a philosophy or an ideology. An ideology is stuck, right? A way of being is fluid. So, I think the political situation specifically, if you're still, by changing politics, you're still a little too focused on an external change to affect a personal day-to-day life existence. I mean, yes, it is better if we live in a system that is much more freedom conducive. I agree with that. Like if Ron Paul, or let's say Rand, becomes the candidate next election, somehow gets elected to president of the United States and makes the country more free, eases restrictions on business and taxes and movement and all this sort of thing. This is all good stuff, but ultimately it's empty unless we're willing to do the massive work within. And in fact, I mean, let's be quite honest. I mean, if we put the majority of focus on ourselves and we open ourselves up to the freedom within, in terms of the freedom of thought, the freedom of emotions, to be free of old stories, to be free of emotional traumas, to be free of all these things, to be open to these things. That's going to impact us so much more in a day-to-day existence than what, Biden or Trump or whoever.
Yeah.
It's just going to, and you see it. And it's not just conjecture to say that, because you do see it when you meet very successful people who are mavericks. And that's the word I generally use, the word maverick. Mark likes pirate, but I like maverick too, because maverick is someone who is to me, I look at the word maverick and I see someone who can work within the system to manipulate it for the better gain for themselves and for their team, their crew, right?
Of course.
And I see those people already in the system figuring out ways to make it work for their companies, to make it work for their families, to make it work for themselves. And so I think that if it's split, down 100%, I think 85-90% should be aimed internally, minimum. And then that other 10%, if we can, make the environment more friendly, more conducive, all the better. But let's face it, I've been saying this stuff for like the past 2 years. If we lived in a country, and this is going to appeal to you as Mr. Maskless, if we lived in a country full of our people, like this maverick crew, like if the average American was like what we see here, Could they have locked this country down for 2 years? Could they have done that?
Absolutely
There's
not.
no fucking way. Can I curse on this podcast?
Fuck yeah.
Okay. Okay. There's no fucking way they could have done that.
Yeah.
Like people would not stand for it. The problem is you've got so many individuals who are so, they're anti-freedom. They're dependents.
Mm.
They're victims, as Mark would say, Mark England. So it's
not today, victim mentality.
Not today, victim mentality. So if you train and if you rep the victim identity, you rep the dependent mentality long enough, and you build a system around that. Well, you can then enact things like highly restrictive movement, highly restrictive policies, and things like that. So again, I think that the answer personally is making as many badass motherfuckers who understand the brilliance of being free emotionally, cognitively, physically, and then we build a society on that.
I'm glad you brought that up. Those three types of freedom that you mentioned: the cognitively, physically, and emotionally. I believe you said. I talk about freedom as three types of freedom as well: physical freedom, emotional freedom, and financial freedom. So physical freedom, being able to do things physically that you want to do, whether that's jet skiing or snowmobiling, like hiking, whatever it is, you should be able to do that thing unrestricted, let alone, be able to play with your kids without getting winded, right? Being healthy. Another aspect of that is being able to protect yourself physically from whatever dangers are out there, you and your family. The emotional freedom is what the enlifted method is all about, not being the victim to any external circumstance or anybody else, like what anybody else says to you. Like you control your thoughts, your feelings, you tell your own stories. The emotional or the financial freedom, self-explanatory, not worrying about where your next paycheck is going to come from, like being able to afford what it is that you want, being able to come to a retreat like this and be able to be free, not have somebody tell you you have to be here at this time and clock in, clock out, do what you typically for a job that you don't like. It's okay to have a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to put that out there. As long as you enjoy it, that is freedom. If you hate your job, you're not free. Right. So those are the types of freedom that I talk
Well, the
about.
decision is the freedom, is to be able to decide and say, I'm deciding, I choose to do this, rather than I have to do this. Like I'm saying, like I'm choosing to, yeah, okay, I have a job. This weekend would be really fun. And I have other weekends that I want to do things on, and I choose to use this weekend to earn my income. I think there's, again, compromise. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit this, because I thought about this last night after we said we're going to talk about freedom. I thought about, like, because a lot of people who are super freedom, like freedom lovers, I want to do everything free, I want to be a pirate. They do forget that no matter what you're going to be doing, you're going to be compromising. There's always going to be some sort of opportunity cost, because when we make decisions, we're leaving other good options on the table.
Every time you're doing something, you're not doing everything else in the entire world.
Absolutely. And of course, like millennials, quote unquote, have like the FOMO thing, and you see this, and that's where that comes from. But like, okay, a relationship. Okay, so I'm married 15 years almost. It's 14 and a half years. And a couple days ago, someone's like, what's that like? How do you do that? And I mean, you see my wife and I are together. We're very happy. I mean, this is the way we are, and we're very close. And I was thinking about that along the lines of freedom. And I go, well, we do meet each other halfway a lot of the times. We do compromise, but that compromise is generally, I would say, reciprocal. Sometimes I compromise with her, sometimes she compromises with me. This is called diplomacy at the political level, compromise in a relationship. Okay. So in a lot of ways, that's like opportunity cost. I can also just like leave her, she can leave me, and then we'd be more free in some ways, but then we'd be seeking other partners potentially, let's say likely, right? So then there's that, then that's an opportunity cost, because now we're going through this process again. So I think regardless of whatever it is that, we're doing, I think that freedom of decision is what's the most important thing to keep in mind. The freedom that you're making that choice, whether it's a 9 to 5, whether it's a reason to go to a retreat like this or to not go, that freedom is that clear-headedness, again, cognitive freedom, emotional freedom. Why am I choosing to go or not to go? Is it out of guilt?
Oh, yeah,
Is it out of shame? Oh, that's not a very free way of making a decision. Or is it a clear-headed decision based out of, here, I'm actually going to look at what I want to do, I'm going to feel into it, and then I'm going to make a decision. That's to me, that's a very free decision-making process when it's clear, both emotionally and cognitively.
When you say feel into it, go into that, because I've been saying that for a while. It's important to connect to the feeling of the outcome of whatever your decision is.
Yeah, intuition, gut decision.
Yeah,
like being able to access that. And how do you get good at doing that? You rep it out. You get good at listening and fine-tuning your gut. It's funny. Recently I was talking to someone about intuitive eating, and I go, well, I get it, but I also think that if you're 150 pounds overweight, that you may need to tune your intuition,
100%.
You see what I'm saying? So like,
I intuitively eat. I don't recommend somebody who's 150 pounds overweight to intuitively eat.
Absolutely.
Because that's what they've been doing, and it's just cravings. And
it's hard to separate the intuitiveness from the cravings, from the desire, from the dopamine hijack, right? So I think what has to happen is we get good at we start repping and we start crafting our ability to make good intuitive choices. And the only way we do that is we get into good lifestyle habits, and we get practiced at this at a high level. You're at that level now. I went off sugar in May, like for reals. I started wearing my CGM in November of last year, and then I started seeing the spikes, and I go, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to go down to like 20, 25 carbs a day. I ended up doing that mostly. What is it now? 5 months now. And now I feel really good about my gut decisions when it comes to food choices. I didn't feel that way 8 months ago, 9 months ago, but my gut feeling on my food choices now are pretty dang good, So yeah, being able to feel into it has to do, I think we have to really qualify that with tuning the intuition.
And that just comes through reps.
It has to, everything comes through reps. Binary language, as many people may know, acknowledged that most things come through repetition.
So let's bring it back to the choice. I talk to a lot of people who believe that it's not their choice, who believe that it's other people are making the choice for them, and they have to follow along with whatever it is. How do people get out of that? What we know is the victim mentality.
Well, this is why Mark and I have been friends for, I mean, I met him a year before my wife, so I've known him for over 15 years, almost 16 years, and we've been in business for 7+ years. And we've been working on language. And it's that simple little word by word adjustment that can add a lot of space and clarity to people's minds. So you asked me, how do people get away, or at least examine the story they have about themselves when it comes to, I can't do this because of this. If you break it down to the word level, a lot of these sentences simply start with, because my mom, or because my job, or because I'm broke, or because I'm not well, I can't do this. So we're the subject, we're the object in the sentence. We're the inanimate object a lot of times in that sentence. And we become, if we rep those types of statements enough, we become minor characters in our autobiography. And so we are the thing being done onto versus doing the thing. If we switch those spaces, if it's because of me, I choose to stay with my mom and take care of her because she has diabetes or something, or I have created the financial situation in which I am now without money. I'm broke. I wouldn't use that term. I would say I'm currently low on money.
Yeah.
Now I choose to work, double time or whatever, or do this job, and then I will do this. It's like you put yourself in the driver's seat rather than the passenger seat with your sentence construction. Mark talks about it, prison sentences, right? So like you're creating sentences that are prisons if you used other things are doing this to me. So what we do is we say let's write our stories all over again, whole cloth, from the basic word level, and put ourselves in the driver's seat. And you rep that enough and you start getting really good at it. And then all of a sudden, every single day, all day long, I am now focused on crafting the story of who I am, or with me as the main character. I mean, I'm telling you, you've seen it, what it does to people when they start putting themselves at the front versus at the end. It has a profound effect on how they live, how they craft their reality. So yeah, that's a huge part of it, is getting out of that habit. Again, reps. Imagine repping the statement, because of the government, I don't have the freedom I want to have, over and over and over. Well, guess what? That's hypnotization. You're going to hypnotize yourself into the point you believe that
you never will have the freedom.
Yeah, you never will. Yeah.
That was the title of our last podcast, by the way, breaking free from your own prison using words.
Yeah.
I believe that was the title. Yeah. So I asked you a question yesterday. We had all these cards laid out. It's like conversation starter questions. And so you mentioned dopamine hijack on the podcast. And this is the answer that you gave to this question. And that was, what do you think will be the long-term effect of everybody being glued to their devices, essentially not free, right? Their brain is literally being hijacked to concentrate on this. They feel like they are not free to, like, if somebody goes without their phone in normal life, not here, because like I said, I've lost my phone and didn't know where it was, and I didn't care. So I'm free here.
Yeah.
But most people, if they lose their phone, it's like, what's happening? Like the world is ending.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're already seeing a lot of the effects of that. And it's interesting right now. I'm doing a sober October where, I mean, no alcohol. I may have ingested other substances. Let's just say no alcohol. And, I'm a moderate. I'll drink occasionally, that sort of thing. But I wanted to do it because it's fun and it's so, but yeah. And here's my thing. I also said, versus abstaining, I also want to start learning about why the brain can get addicted to substances and why we can get addicted to things. And I'll use that month to learn more about it. So I've been listening to a lot of Huberman, and he had this woman, Anna Lemke, on. People may know about her. She's the author of Dopamine Nation. I started reading her book a couple days ago, and I've been listening to a lot of her talks. And it's all about dopamine hijack. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's you stare at a screen. She calls it a limbic system economy, essentially, with these phones, where they're designed to hijack your dopamine. Video games. She said her she's a clinician. Her number one patient now are video game kids,
really,
who are addicted. I mean, like they all day long, every day. Okay.
So do they enjoy that? Because there are like some professional video game players who are making millions of dollars who love their lives.
It's funny you say that, because she goes, that's funny, because I believe Rogan or someone brought it up on her episode with him, and she goes, every one of these kids thinks that they're that guy. There's 1 in a million who can do that, And here's the deal: do they really enjoy it? It's like, okay, so if gambling addicts, alcoholics, anybody who's an addict of some sort. Yeah. At a certain point, porn addiction is huge too. At a certain point, it stops becoming pleasurable, and you're simply scratching an itch. It's a dull irritation that stays there in the back of your head. So if you enjoy something like, Dave Robinson, who he and I will play some FIFA, and we'll have a good time. Then I'll put it down and I'll go do something else.
Going back to making the choice.
Yeah, exactly. But when you're in an addiction situation with the phone is engineered to get you addicted to it. Like every app, when it says turn on notifications, why are they doing that? It's like, is it really important for you to know? Sometimes, most of the times, we want to get you hijacked and addicted to this app, because they don't call it an addiction, they call it engagement in the app world. So we have to create engagement, which is let's face it, that's just another word in this case, for addiction in this case. So I think this screen thing, it does a couple of things. It hijacks the dopamine. So we're constantly doing this. We're having to reach over for something. Oh shit, did I check my phone? Did I do this? Okay, that's part one. Part two, obviously we know that it's disrupting sleep. That's pretty common knowledge with the blue light and all that stuff, even if you wear the blockers and everything. But I think the big thing with it is, and that scares me in a lot of ways, and I know there's a lot of literature on this, and people know about it. I asked the follow-up question when you asked me last night, when you pulled that card and said, hey, what's going to happen? I said, well, it's going to make the addiction to screens is going to make people less inclined to go out and practice and get good at, thus seek out more of these real life social situations. And I asked the question, raise your hand if you used your phone less since you've been here. Everyone raised their hand. Okay. Well, do you think Mark Zuckerberg likes that answer? Do you think, that Tim Cook likes that answer? If you're using your phone less, you're less engaged, right? You're doing this. And by the way, to get good at this, like you said, the first thing we talked about, you have to rep working on yourself, so you can go into a room of 25 people that most of them you just met 3 days ago and have a great time with them, and
how to actually talk to them,
how to be quiet.
Yeah.
And be on your own sometimes, and then go re-engage with them. There's a lot of young people who have no idea how to do all this stuff.
Here's the fun fact. I have never, well, maybe like in middle school, but I have never approached a girl and asked her on a date.
Interesting.
True story.
Is that because they all like flock to you? I had to stroke your ego a little bit.
Sometimes that has happened. That's how I've gotten away with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always because I've been nervous to, like, I didn't know how to do that. There was fear of rejection, because I wasn't sure of myself or confident in any way. I didn't know how to talk. Right. A lot of that, I think a lot of that could have came from phone use and video games, although I grew up in an era where the phone use wasn't as prevalent, like it was just starting to become prevalent. So I can't even imagine what kids these days are like, where they get a phone at like fucking 10 years old.
It's insane.
And that's just their whole world. Like TikTok I think is the worst amongst kids, because you get something new whenever you flick your finger, and it just keeps you focused. Like, so as a content creator now, I'm learning how to keep people's engagement, because I've got valuable information to share, but they don't want to hear it because there's all this other entertaining stuff out there that's going to keep their engagement. So I have to figure out how to steal that away from the negative downward spiral information to things that are going to uplift them. And one of those things is quickly changing the camera angle, or zooming in, zooming out, putting text on the screen, like all these beep, boop, boop, bop, like a casino, like all these flashy lights. Like, that's what it's come down to keep our attention.
Does that feel like you're lowering yourself ever, or do you feel like this is the mission and that I have to engage with people with where they are?
It did in the beginning, and now I understand that that's just what it takes, because if I were to just be bland and boring and just no video editing whatsoever, just tell you the information, nobody's going to listen to that. Like, I have to present it in a way that is new, that is exciting, that is still educational and entertaining at the same time. And that is what I believe is the way forward. Like, professors, they have great information, but a lot of them are boring to talk to. You fall asleep in the lecture, right?
Well, they could get away with it back in my era. I'm I'm a little
Because there
older than
was
you.
no device
There
that you could
was
just pull up and
absolutely. Yeah. And I think this goes back to the dopamine. It also goes back to this attention situation that we're in where ADHD is, I mean, let's say it's as high as it's ever been. And there's a lot of different definitions of ADHD and what it really means. But let's say this, it's like, you know, Vanda and I lived in Thailand. That's where we met. Our families, I have half of my family there. Hers is there as well. And there's a lot of MSG in food in Thailand. You know what MSG is? Monosodium sodium glutamate. It's basically, it's an engineered chemical that helps take a flavor and accelerate that flavor and blow up in the mind. Essentially, it's in our food too. It's called yeast extract. You may know about this already, but whenever you see yeast extract on a bag of chips, stay away. That's there to amplify things. That's exactly what this TikTok aesthetic is. It's this casino thing to take a piece of information and put it in your brain and like just pop all the neurons firing, right? So we're dealing with people who are essentially eating Doritos all day long cognitively. You know, if they're on TikTok, they are mainlining Cool Ranch and Fritos and everything you could imagine and Taco Bell. So when you give them a kale salad, it's like, what the fuck is this? Get this away from me. What is this oil? I want something that's gonna literally, I want drugs.
Yeah.
That's what a drug does, right?
Because these, and I've been there. I've woken up and like played video games. I've been addicted to porn. I've been addicted to video games. I've been addicted to my phone. I've been addicted to alcohol. Like I've been there, and it feels like you're not yourself when you're not playing the video game. Like all of a sudden you just have these urges, and in that way it is a drug because it is racing the dopamine, and you feel like you have low dopamine, so you want to go do this thing. So now let's talk about how to get out of that.
Yeah,
that dopamine hijack.
And here's what it is. It's called thug it out. Yeah, I mean, because it has to. She talks about it. It's essentially, again, she's the expert. All your listeners, all your viewers, go check out Anna Lemke. She's good. So dopamine is a seesaw or a teeter-totter, you know, and what we're doing is we got pleasure, pain, pleasure, pain. What we're meant to be doing as human beings, like ancestrally, is doing this, like a light little wave of dopamine. Dopamine goes up a little bit, goes down. Dopamine goes up a little bit, goes down. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about what dopamine does. Dopamine is not happiness. Dopamine is the craving for something positive. Okay. So they did an experiment. They had two rats where they took one rat, they figured out how to remove dopamine from its system. Okay. They had another rat, normal. Okay. Your control group. They put the food in front of both rats, a little meal. Okay. Both rats would eat it. They took the food and they put it walking distance away from both rats. The control group rat, normal rat, went over there and ate it. Okay. A dopamine free rat starved to death. Wouldn't go over. It just wouldn't walk over there. Okay.
With no dopamine.
No dopamine. Because that's what dopamine does. It's craving.
It's the motivation.
It's the next hit. Yeah. I want the next hit. I want that thing. It's craving. It's want. It's desire. We're supposed to do this. I want to eat. I'm going to go hunt an elk. I want to procreate. I'm going to seek out a mate, et cetera, right? Yeah. So it's like this. What we do though with these addictive substances like alcohol, video games, pornography, you name it, phones, is that it's such a high thing, and we never let it balance back out. We never let it have the ebb and flow. We let it get up, and then it starts to come down a little bit, and we're like, fuck that. I am not going to go down here. Yeah. Even if it's like a minor, if it's minorly uncomfortable, we have no experience with that. That we call it boredom. I don't want to be bored, right? So we keep stacking it. We keep stacking it. We keep stacking it. We keep stacking it. What happens? That one side of that teeter-totter, that one side of that seesaw is so heavy now, right? And this other side has so few reps on it. So when we finally do let go, and we say, I'm not going to engage in this behavior anymore. I'm not engaged in this video game or this pornos or these fucking, whatever the substances I'm using.
Coffee
could be. Doing coffee fast. That'll do it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we let go, and then it's like, boom, cold turkey. Fuck me. Now, I don't have any, as the person experiencing this, I don't have any experience dealing with minor discomfort, much less this leveling off of the dopamine, overload on this side. Mm-hmm. It can feel like dog shit. Mm-hmm. Okay. But guess what? Eventually it doesn't. if you just thug it out. And now if you have a substance abuse problem and like it's like a physically addictive substance, there's advanced ways to deal with this. I'm talking about, let's say, if you just said, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm just going to feel miserable for a while and just abstain. Eventually, everything will level out. If you're the kind of person that could do moderation, maybe you go from everyday drinking to, maybe twice a week or something. I don't know. But eventually you want to get back to level, and the body will start to get level, and it'll start to do this again. And you'll start to see things clearly, like, oh, that actually wasn't very fun. It was just it was an urge.
Well, I think dopamine will actually rise once you, and I don't know the science behind this, but you'll feel better once you cut out all of your addictions and you put yourself through challenge and discomfort. I talk about it all the time. The only way to truly experience pleasure, because these people who are addicted, myself, when I was addicted included, had the pleasure in the moment, but then after the fact, we felt guilty. Like, we know we're not supposed to be doing these things. We know we're not supposed to play video games all day. We know we're not supposed to spend 2 hours jerking off to porn, right? Like, we just know it feels good in the moment, and we don't want to stop. But then after, we're like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I just wasted my life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the only way to truly experience real pleasure is to first go through discomfort and challenge, because on the other side of that, you can actually appreciate the comfort, like the ice bath and the cold shower.
100%, man. That's exact. I mean, in Rogan, this is what he said to Lemke, because he said the reason that he stays away from addiction is because he has been fortunately blessed with the ability to seek out challenging hard things. So he seeks out challenging hard things, and then the other side of it is that proper dosed dopamine hit. It's the reward for having to do those really difficult things in his life. He spends months working on a comedy set. He does a special. It fucking he nails it. Perfect. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yes.
Versus the 2-hour beat off session every day. I mean, come on, but, and I think that's the thing is, like you said, the ice. I mean, I just recently got into the ice, and it was again, words, story, reality. That's our model at Lifted. And I changed the words. So at first I was like, I'm getting into an ice bath this year. And I said it. I told Chase, our buddy Chase, I said, I'm getting into an ice bath this year. Okay. Said it out loud, spelled it as we say it, like a spell, magic. And then I started taking cold showers. What was my mantra in the cold showers? I could have said, it's cold. Ooh, this sucks. No, I said, this is an adjustment period. Whenever I go into a cold shower, this is an adjustment period. And then I would say, oh, and this is the best part. When I finally adjusted, right? And that was the mantra, words. Okay. That became my story. I like cold showers. I'll take one right now. I like them. I used to fucking hate them. Yeah. I like them now. Okay. It's a story. And then the reality now, got into an ice bath. That one right there, I actually had ice in that bath over there. And we're in Mark's room right now. Put some ice in there. Chase was here, popped in there a few months ago, 3 minutes, loved it.
Okay.
And afterwards, I was like, the rush, the fucking, because we went through the proper stages, proper challenge again. And the fact that we had friends and we had, we did it as a group, and then we had that release afterwards. I mean, and we're doing something good for our bodies too, man, reducing inflammation, so many other things.
And ice baths raise dopamine levels by up to like 200%. Like, good. I talk about, once you can eliminate the bad habits that raise dopamine and replace them with good habits that raise dopamine, like ice baths, like exercise, like sunlight raises dopamine. Once you can replace the bad habits with the good habits that raise dopamine, then you can actually experience a good life. Right? And then once you're free from those addictions, it becomes a choice to drink coffee in the morning, as opposed to you need that to feel awake. It becomes a choice to consume alcohol, as opposed to you need this liquid courage to have a good time. Right. So it all goes back to freedom of choice.
It goes back to choice. And by all these things, I know we started with pirate and freedom and all that stuff. All this conversation has been about building the tools or learning the tools to be a craftsman, to create this freedom, words, ice baths, dopamine, understanding dopamine, getting away from bad habits. This is all this. We're all talking about freedom. You know, the Jocko thing that everyone says all the time, which is so fucking awesome. Discipline equals freedom.
Yeah.
Well, no shit. Yeah, we can control ourselves. I mean, imagine the amount of freedom that we can have once we have that power. I mean, I'm still layering, you know, and I'm in my 40s. I'm still layering new levels of freedom because I'm getting more and more I'm gaining more understanding of myself, more ability to manipulate myself and my understanding of the world and of who I am. And this creates more and more freedom. And by the way, do we want all this freedom bestowed upon us at one time? Could we even handle it? No, that's where the discipline comes in. That's where the craft comes in, you know, and continuously iterating on this process so that we'll be ready for that freedom when we have it, you know.
Let's talk about the balance of different types of freedom, because there's like kids of extremely affluent families, for example. They've got the financial freedom to do whatever the fuck they want. And a lot of the times that leads to poor emotional freedom because they're just seeking out all this comfort. So how do we balance freedom properly? Like, how do we balance freedom of choice, essentially? Like, how do we know which choices to make?
Well, those kids, you know, a guy told me a long time ago, like 20 years ago, he said he's a successful guy, he was a former college football player and he's a really cool dude, Andy Dinkin. He said, you know, my mentor told me that you have to have sympathy for all people, including the richest, wealthiest kids out there, because oftentimes they're the ones that are struggling the most. And that allowed me to let go of any resentment for people who were born into wealth, because if you really study them and you get to know a lot of these people, some of them are very fortunate because their parents are wealthy and their parents are also great parents. Like that's like the jackpot, but that's very uncommon. Like oftentimes, like you can literally roll the dice and say, hey, I'm either going to come out a rich kid to some shitty parent or win the lottery. Either way, I'm going to be fucked in about 3 or 4 years. You study lottery winners, you know this thing, right?
Yeah.
They're all most of them are miserable
because it's the mindset.
Well, like we said, they get all the freedom at once. It's like they go from 0 to 100 it's like they go down into they go up into space without acclimating, or go down into the ocean without acclimating, you know, like this. And so they don't have the tools to deal with all this financial freedom. You know, and I think a lot of these young kids, because they have I think Malcolm Gladwell was the first one to bring this up, is like, once you get to say $70,000, I think that was say 15 years ago, let's say it's $120,000 today. Okay. Once you get to about $120,000 in combined household income, the quality of what you can do as a parent and how you can raise a child actually goes down. They've done all these tests to see what it's like to raise children once you make over 100. Again, I'm adjusting for inflation here, $120,000 a year. It becomes harder because now all of a sudden, as a parent, you can't. Before, you had a very easy, a very simple way to tell your child, no, we can't afford it. And the child looks around and the child says, yep, you're right, we can't afford it. You're right. And it's done. It's almost like God told you not to do it. Right. It's just it's a solid fact. But as you cross that threshold in terms of income, the kid looks around and says, I don't know, there's a Porsche out there and there's like a really nice house. And I don't know, I went to Montessori and then I went to private and all. And they're thinking, we can afford it. So then the parent has to get good at explaining no, and here's why. And that's a lot of parents have a difficult time doing that. No, and here's why. And then the kid has a harder time to accept it.
Yeah.
So I do think that a lot of these kids who grow up with a lot of privilege and have access to everything, like in a lot of ways, that's a very special curse. And it can be, not all the time. Like I know a guy he's very wealthy, he's got 2 kids, he's nailing it. Right. But I mean, I also know people who've come through that whole pipeline and have been, I mean, the drug use, the unfettered access to basically anything. I mean, and again, in Thailand, where Vanda and we have family, it's basically an oligarchy over there. And the very wealthiest people have all the money, and their kids oftentimes are disgraces. Like they get away with anything. and it's ruining the society in a lot of ways. So I do think if the question is what happens, when you see people who have all this access to quote unquote freedom, if they didn't work to get it, if they don't understand the craft of what freedom is. Again, first of all, do they have emotional freedom? The answer is probably no. Do they have cognitive freedom? The answer is probably no. They have one of those three things that you talk about. They have financial, they probably don't have the physical freedom either. A lot of these kids are, they're overweight or they're not in shape, etc. So anyways, that's a long answer to your question. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that nails it. I gave this example on a podcast that I was on of Dan Bilzerian, a man who chased pleasure to its fullest extent. Can't have more pleasure than Dan Bilzerian had, right? Sex with any woman whenever he wanted.
And good looking women too.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Whenever he wanted, any woman, basically, drugs, alcohol, parties all the time. And he has said that is not the answer. Like, he's chased pleasure to its fullest and he's not fulfilled. So this is something that, not that I say, I think this was a Viktor Frankl quote. A man who lacks purpose distracts himself with pleasure. Right. So I think ultimately to really have the freedom of choice, you have to understand why you're making those decisions, like what those decisions are moving you towards this purpose that you have for yourself. If you don't have that purpose, if you're just on autopilot, on programming that's not yours, you're going to be clueless.
It's like engineering pleasure. It would be like engineering the greatest, like learning all these tools and getting good at them and not having a purpose would be like engineering the greatest prison escape of all time, like topping El Chapo. And then you get out and you're like, what am I doing here? And you just end up fucking around and getting back in prison because, it's like, no, the whole idea is you engineer the prison escape so that you can get somewhere where you want to be, that purpose, that singular focus, right? That thing that I'm here for. A lot of people, it's their kids. A lot of people, that's it. Could be something else, a mission. You have a mission right now that you're on. You're spreading this message. You're building yourself. You're embodying this captain's lifestyle. At Unlifted, we have our mission, and you got to have both, right? You can't just have a mission and no tools, and then stay in the prison, and you can't do the other side either, right? So, Viktor Frankl. I mean, you know what? Last night I was thinking, man's search for meaning is going to come up at least once in this conversation that you and I have today. And of course it did. Abracadabra.
Abracadabra. Man's search for meaning is, it's in my top 5 recommended reads for everybody. It just provides so much perspective. Like, in the worst possible situation a human being can be in, this man found purpose and was able to accept and surrender to his external circumstances, and he had the freedom in his own head because the Nazis couldn't take away his freedom to choose how he responded to the situation.
It's one of the hardest books I've ever read. Because it tugs at a certain part of of the heart, my heart, and to see someone go through that, because I had seen a film before I had read the book. I had seen this film in the 90s. It was a well-known like an art movie from Italy in the 90s called
you mentioned that.
Life is Beautiful.
Yeah.
And Roberto Benigni, he won, I believe, Best Actor for that, I want to say. And it's about him being stuck in a concentration camp and essentially knowing that, this is no spoiler, this is in the trailer, knowing that he's doomed, but he has a young son and they're with him. And at no point will he allow the Nazis to take away his son's sense of hope and spirit. And Benigni is a very famous comedian in Italy. So Benigni uses comedy to help his son stay alive and laugh. And man, that movie, I go back and I watch movies again a lot of times. I've yet to go back and watch that because I know it's going to be just bawling. Yeah. It's so powerful. That sense of hope and selflessness and resilience in the face of all of that is just so powerful to me. But that's why we're here. That's the humanity, to rise above. You talk about Bilzerian. I mean, he's essentially going through the Buddha's journey. I mean, right? The Buddha had everything. The Buddha was a king, a prince. He had as many women, wine, you know, riches. He was a lord and gave it all away because it wasn't enough.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, read Siddhartha, the Herman Hesse book. It's a really good entry to that story. Yeah, it's quite good. I think you'll really dig it. But yeah, I mean, the more I like, by the way, let's preface this. I love nice things. Like nice things are fun. They're cool. I love having, nice cars, nice home to live in.
The jade stone that you're
Yeah,
walking around with, the fur coat.
The fur coat. Well, that was my it was the movie Inception where they have the totem where that's how they hold on to what reality they're in.
Yeah.
Let's just say if you take enough substances, sometimes you got to have a little totem to keep you here to this
to let you know
tethered to this reality. So that was that soapstone was my tether. So thanks to Kim Kesting for giving that to me. Yeah. It's there is something about just I have no idea where we left off, by the way. I got so into that soapstone just now. I lost my train of thought. But
we need one now.
I need one,
to bring us back. So what we talked about purpose. What is your purpose?
That's great. That's
like,
a great question.
Why are you making decisions?
My major decision right now, and this is why I am very much indebted to Mark. Mark and I are different personalities. You may have seen that. We're very different. Yeah. And the reason that we're still in business doing this together is because it's very similar to the event we did in On It in Austin just a couple of weeks ago.
I heard that crushed it.
Dude, seeing people from all walks of life come into a space like that and have this experience where they're literally letting go of shit they've been carrying on their backs for decades, some of them.
Once they realize that they don't have to keep carrying it. And you can just
it's like, okay, done with that. Next, Yeah. That's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
Take out the prison.
I set you up for that one. So the purpose for me is that, okay, yeah, I have other passions that eventually I want to explore. I have an artist's heart. I want to create more and do more things visually and things like that. I'll eventually do all that stuff. My purpose at this moment is to help build this into the thing that I know it can become.
What is it becoming?
Good question. It is becoming, it will, again, I'm going to spell this. It has the potential, I know it can do this, to become the household synonymous name with mindset, because it's the practical mindset tool set that's been missing. People say, have a better mindset. You should think more positive. It's like, what do I do with that? Well, here's a step-by-step guide. And by the way, this is another brilliant Mark England quote. It's like, this is not mind control. This is you control your mind.
Yes.
We at 0 point do we ever tell you what to think. That's the brilliance of this. You tell us your words. We're going to show you how you can reconfigure them like Legos into something specific for you. And let's see how it hits. And you've seen it multiple times. When you configure those words in a different format, it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
That's what had me stuck. And this is why I love this work. I do believe this has, like I said, the opportunity to be something that the majority of people, certainly in this country and internationally as well, know as being one of the essential tools of mindset, up there with basically like the Dale Carnegie and the Napoleon Hill of this era, almost a century later. So
fantastic books, by the way.
Still hold up.
Yeah.
Still hold up. My mentor, Jeffrey Gedimer, introduced me to these books. He's a big personal development guy and author. He introduced me to those books 30 or 20 years ago. And man, they still have steam.
Is there going to be an Unlifted book?
Yeah, there will be. Yeah, that's coming up. I would say 2024 is when we'll feel very comfortable putting a book out. We'll be at a good spot.
Same timeline as the app, or what?
App's already in the App Store, and it's early days for the app in the App Store. It launched about a month and a half ago. I want to say a month and change. And we're going through some iterative processes. Whenever you start businesses, as you and your audience know, You want to put out the minimum lovable product, as Eric Blackwell, our product manager, calls it. And with that product, if your audience knows about the lean startup, the Eric Ries book, what you do is you want to put out just enough so you can get data, get customer feedback and experience,
then tweak it,
and then you can iterate, tweak. You want to keep. So what we're doing right now is we've got it in the App Store. We've got our hundreds. It may be 1,000 now, but it's certainly in the hundreds of users to give us data. So we can track all this, how people are using it, what we can improve. They send us feedback. We test with it. And eventually what happens is then we start making larger and larger upgrades based on that data versus us as, all knowing, all seeing authors.
Make it perfect.
There's no such thing. You have to, like, it's like the no business plan survives first contact with the marketplace, like the Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yeah, it's the same thing with business, right? So we iterate, get better. So I would say that app will be hitting its stride next year in 2023, because we'll likely do a design refresh on it, and we'll definitely have a lot of behind the scenes refreshes.
This podcast will come out, I imagine, in like 2 months.
Okay.
So what can we expect from the app during that time frame?
Certainly it has the transcription engine already. So what the app is, and I'll give you some context on that, is it's essentially a voice journal. It's a journal for people who hate journaling. It's a way to record your thoughts as you experience them in real time. So there's a lot of apps, including the Notes app in the iPhone, you hit transcription and you'll see the words. What makes this different is you hit the button, you transcribe your thoughts as you're feeling them,
and then it automatically corrects the soft talk.
It will give you,
that would be cool.
It will get it highlights. It shows you, and then you go, and then so we have the option of doing an auto translate, and we want to introduce that eventually. But we want people now to see it. We want because if they see it just and click it, they'll actually do some sort of minimal interaction of changing their words. So it's almost like a spell check. When it will literally spell check. They click it and they see, oh, that's a phrase I could use instead. That's a phrase I can use instead. So we're constantly tweaking and upgrading the technology to make it even smoother. It's pretty smooth now. And you can get a very quick down and dirty understanding of some of the phrases and words you could be using that are keeping you stuck.
So if I understand this correctly, it's highlighting what soft talk, negations, projections.
Yes,
binary.
Yeah, binaries in there for sure. We're adding more and more tech and words in there. In our new course, we just introduced this new piece of tech called dramatics. Which will be in there eventually as well. Dramatics being something, if your audience is already familiar with our other technology or other tech, as Mark calls it, dramatics for words when we say like, oh, this is a mind-blowing cinnamon roll. It's like, was it? Did your mind get blown? It's like, again, dopamine hijack.
Yeah.
Was it a good cinnamon roll? Okay, good. Okay, we'll bring that down. Or this was an earth-shattering revelation. Was it? Did the earth shatter? Let's bring it all down. Let's save the earth-shattering for things that really matter.
This is the worst thing that's happened in my life.
That's where I'm getting to. It's like, this is the worst thing ever. It's like, really?
Really?
I mean, let me tell you about the time that USS Indianapolis, whatever, went down in the South Pacific, and the guys got eaten by sharks.
Horrific story.
Yeah, that was the worst day ever. I think that qualifies. You had a bad moment. I mean, these guys are done. So, so stuff like that. We'll have that in the app as well eventually. And there's, again, the goal is to. So much of this language work is to reduce this conflict, reduce the inflammation, in terms of the words. I'm using those words metaphorically, of course, but this reduction and keeping it clear.
Well, yeah, but it actually reduces inflammation, because once you reduce the stress of being trapped in your own prison from your words, you reduce inflammation.
Eventually we want to get studies. I would love to get the Huberman Labs on this.
Dude.
Eventually. That's a goal of mine, is to get the Huberman Labs to look at people who are speaking primarily in we call architect language versus conflict language, and see if there is a brain like a white matter, gray matter increase or decrease depending on what they're using. Because a lot of people who are cognitively inflamed consistently, they lose all the good stuff. It's all the gray matter goes away. They're in full hijack mode, amygdala hijack. They're in sympathetic stress response, because it's all basically reptilian function of the brain. It's all like react, versus being able to think in those executive functions of the brain very clearly. So our goal would ultimately be putting this stuff into the lab. But I mean, at the end of the day, you've seen it in real time. It works. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of how we can study it.
I say all the time, like, we need to stop relying on peer-reviewed scientific studies before we do something. Like, you don't need a fucking scientific study or I don't need a scientific study to tell me that putting my bare feet on the earth and standing in the sunshine helps me feel better. Like, just go do the fucking thing. Like, same thing with this. I can tell you 100% that once you change your words and change the stories, you will reduce inflammation. You will become this new free person. And you can't create if you're in a state of stress and fight or flight. Like, if you're, evolutionarily speaking, if you're running from a mountain lion or whatever it is, you're not worried about creating your next business plan or painting or whatever. You're worried about getting away from the pain. So once you change the stories around that, reduce the inflammation in the brain, you can actually think clearly and start to make the decisions, make the choices towards the life that you actually want to live.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's self-evident. I mean, if you reduce the amount of times that you're living in some sort of high cortisol state, where you're stressed all the time, and you practice being calm, you're going to start seeing more opportunities to let your mind go into this, what they call like divergent thinking, and then being creative, and you'll notice it. You'll have more time to read. Like, hey, by the way, read fiction, read nonfiction, read them both. People can. I thought about it last night. It's like, you go back half a century, people were reading novels. Who the fuck reads a novel now? It's like people can barely watch a TikTok. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly women.
Yeah.
But you'll see guys doing it. But read long form. Watch long form. Look at watch Peterson talks. Watch like lectures. You can do that when you're not in hijack mode. When you're not in full cortisol mode. It's self-evident, like you said. So yeah, man, I'm a huge. I do believe that there is a cognitive shit that's happening at a brain function level. Whether or not we have to test it out and to determine whether or not it's laboratory proven, that'll come one day.
I think it would be good to do that to get the people who need a certified doctor to tell them anything for them to listen to, right? I think it would be good to have the studies to say, hey, motherfucker, like, this shit works. It's been proven.
Right? Well, like I said, when we become the household synonymous name with mindset, it will have to have that, because a certain segment of our society, a large segment, is trained that if I have to see a white coat,
with a
stethoscope, and pointing to this thing, and if they say that, then this is correct. So that's fine.
So I was joking about the like, you talk into the app and it automatically corrects that's fascinating that it's actually going to be doing that, and that it highlights it now. And then does it give you corrections and translations? That's amazing.
Those guys have done a really good job. Again, it's iterative. So this is the first gen of this tech. Like, I encourage people to go to the App Store. It's iOS only right now, exclusively, I should say. And it's you just simply type in Enlifted with an F.
The link will be in the show notes description.
And download it, give it a shot, send us feedback, and leave a review if you want, or just simply email team@enlifted.app for any feedback, notes, reviews, that sort of thing. Because these guys worked their asses off over the past 18-20 months to get it to this point. And then we had to go through a lot of iterations. One of the guys here, you met, Cam King, he built it all on one platform and realized that, oh, you know what, it's better to be on another platform. So we had other guys come in and they rebuilt it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, this is a great segue into more talks of freedom, because when that happened, our team was remoralized. It wasn't demoralized, because we all had gone through this work together.
Yeah.
So the people on the team are Enlifted people, or have done the work themselves. So when that happened, it was like, okay, cool. Well, we'll be in there 10 months later. That's fine, in the App Store. That's okay. It'll be better. And we kept the story, again, keep the story small versus this big, overwhelming story. We're going to all die. We're never going to make any money. This is no. Keep the story small.
Yeah.
It's a delay. It's a delay for the best. We will find other developers that can work with us in this new platform. They will be out there. We found them. They're really good. Okay. It just took a little time. Patience is something else. I mean, think about that. I mean, do you think a lot of people, this is like a obvious answer, but do you meet people who have problems with patience in your circle who I mean, I mean,
That's a silly question.
who, because again, with that whole dopamine culture we're in, this limbic hijack culture, everything has got to be now, right? So versus, it's okay. It'll be next year.
Yeah.
They say that the reason the Chinese are taking over this world is because they think in terms of centuries and decades.
I like to say in my own process, I'm 7 steps in to a marathon. Like I'm just getting started, So same thing with the Enlifted app, the all things encompassing Enlifted. It sounds like you guys are in the mindset of this is a marathon, not a sprint. It's okay if it's not perfect now. We are going to continually upgrade. Right.
Dude, I think it was Dave Ramsey of all people. He said, make it a commitment to get your company on the cover of Slow Company magazine. It's like as a joke.
Yeah.
Because, many of the stable businesses that have been around for a long time are iterative. They're gradual. These aren't pump and dump schemes, negation and knowledge. These are companies, and Mark and I, we built this very slowly, very methodically. It was this, let's hit this number.
And it's
this number.
Purpose driven.
It's purpose driven.
You read Good to Great, Jim Collins, and it's all binary. Most of the successful businesses, although it may be all, I don't know, show me a company who is a successful company today without a mission statement, core values, like this purpose, right? I don't believe there are any, or I don't believe that there will be in the future. The business is moving more towards purpose and impact, and where consumers are waking up to the fact that all of these large corporations are just worried about money themselves. Like they don't care about our health or happiness. Like they just want growth for themselves. So is Enlifted and the Enlifted app the key to freedom?
Oh, is it the key? No, it's a key.
A key.
It's a key. We're all going to find, each of us are going to find our entry point into a way to unlock something in ourselves. For some people, it could be a very deeply spiritual practice. Could they find something, they find a Baba or some sort of, a spiritual leader in Asia, and they go and seek that person's findings and they open themselves up that way. Some people, it will be through physical fitness. Some people, it'll be through words. It'll be the combination of these things. And
I think a lot of people here it was CrossFit.
Yeah.
It was CrossFit for me that first got me started into the whole personal development world. It was CrossFit. Then I started listening to like the Ben Bergeron podcast, listening to mindset, understanding how important that is. And then I heard Mark England on the Barbell Shrugged podcast in 2016.
Oh yeah, you're one of those people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we sold a lot of courses from Barbell, and we made a lot of friends from that episode.
Yeah. Is that where you find most people get introduced to the Enlifted method, like through fitness? Or
well, the reason we went from the previous incarnation of what we're doing called Vocabulary to Enlifted is we wanted to build product that identified, that met people where they were at in terms of the people that were attracted to our work. And those we found were athletes, were people who are performance athletes, CrossFitters, gym rats, people who wanted to better themselves and to improve. So they're already on the path to making life better for themselves. Mark, his background was as a Muay Thai fighter, he was a very early MMA fighter. So he could speak to that language, directly, and they resonated with Mark. So it's like the messenger with the right audience. We now had a very specific person we could speak to. So yeah, I think if you imagine going into a room of people who don't want to, who've never done a single thing to improve their lives. Well, if you start talking about changing words and how we're going to upgrade you're starting from ground zero. But if you're working with people who are already dedicating hours of their week, I mean, like many hours, pain, struggle, dedication to make themselves better, well, they can simply apply that lesson to the cognitive realm. They understand it's like, oh, well, I can do all this and make my thoughts clearer and better as well. And then I can be happy when I go home to see my family or be with my friends or be by myself. So that's why we really love that particular audience.
If somebody's listening right now and they haven't really gotten started in their personal development journey, like they're still struggling to go to the gym or to eat right or to sleep, or let alone understand the victim mentality, because that's rarely talked about, what would you recommend them to like take this next step to immerse themselves into this world?
Great question. Well, of course, there's a lot of free references online. You can definitely, if you want to learn about our stuff, we have a series of podcasts that are free called Unlimited Essentials that Kim and Kimberly Kesting and Mark recorded to introduce you to our material. And that's
my podcast with Mark England is my #1 recommended podcast.
Hell
like,
yeah.
People ask me for like which one do you recommend? I was like, episode 126, how to, or what is it called? Overcoming the victim mentality using language jujitsu, I think is the title.
Nice.
It's my #1 recommended podcast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, it's so true, man. It's like these little words. A lot of us think that our thoughts are us, you know. So like, as I said, like, hey, you know, your brain produces these raw thoughts. That's what it does. Your ears produce earwax, you know, your nose produces boogers, you know. But it's like, okay, cool. But
you are not your boogers.
You're not your booger. It's like so it's like what your brain does is you process these raw thoughts, and this is another brilliant Mark phrase. It's like, oh great, first thing came to my head, I freaking nailed it. That's me. I don't have to examine it one bit. I nailed it in the first try. You know, it's like what happens when you take that first draft that you write as a paper for school and you turn it in. It gets an F.
It's gonna suck.
It's gonna suck. You know, 90% of the time it's gonna suck. What we want to do is we want to examine these thoughts that are in our head. We want to draft them, get them down on paper, look at them, and then we want to craft them. Yeah, get distance. So the drafting gets a distance from the thoughts in our head. Look at them, craft them like a craftsman, and then be like, oh, look at those words and say, oh, you know, that's what, okay, there was a raw thought there. That's what I was going for on paper here. So I'm going to rep that mantra. I'm going to rep that story in my head about who I am versus this raw thing that popped in here. You know, so that's what we do. We teach people how to craft. We open the door for them to get it out of their head and then teach them how to craft it.
Do you think that's ultimately why a lot of people are not free, that they're trapped in their own prisons, because they're just taking their thoughts as fact?
Cognitively, yeah. I do believe. I think a lot of it has to do with I'm taking this rough draft whim of a feeling and running with it as the definition of who I am. I mean, that sounds miserable upon reflection. Is that I was feeling a certain way today, or I had this random thought, and I'm just going to stick with that as far as who I am and run with that definition for as long as I want until I can't do it anymore. It's so amateurish if you think of it in those ways. It's like no other facet of our life is done this way. Like with your fitness, you're tracking like, okay, what did I do today? How much did I lift? Or what was my PR? What was this? If I'm doing macros, I'm looking at my food. I'm tracking my weight. I'm tracking body fat. I'm tracking everything. Well, then why the hell is like the first thought to come into your head about you? That's okay. Everything else I have to measure and improve and track. But this thing, I don't have to quantify at all. I can just let it go.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to think about. I mean, that's how we approach our thoughts.
That's one of the problems that I have with the Whoop wristband and any sort of fitness wearable tracker is like one night I got a night of poor sleep, and I got a notification on my phone that said, you got less sleep than usual. Expect to be more tired today. Something like that. And it's like, what?
That's okay. Thumbs down. Thumbs
Yeah.
down for that one. That's called a spell as well. We call that a spell at Enlifted. It's Mark he has the definition memorized. But essentially, it's a combination of words that have great influence over our lives. Okay. They tell you that. Guess what you're gonna do?
You're gonna feel more tired.
You're gonna focus on that, and you're gonna be like, I'm gonna feel more tired today, and you're gonna eventually manifest that. Okay. So
Unless you know the enlifted method.
unless
I
you have
saw that and I was like, bullshit. I was like,
no,
let's fucking go.
no, you're gonna be more tired today.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna charge your ass. I'm not gonna charge you, Whoop Band. You know. So be careful for those types of things. You see them everywhere in society. See, we have to talk about that. We may skip that today, but I'll touch on it. Once you understand how the words work, you can see again. I'll go external for a little bit here, but you can see how powers that want to stay in power, people who want to control and or manipulate you, dark energy things, how those propaganda machines utilize words to essentially make people feel a certain way. We saw a lot of it the past couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, so again, there could be, just like any of those children's books that you read when you were a kid, there can be dark spells, it can be white spells. So be very much on the lookout for these Whoop Band type messages and worse.
I don't think the Whoop Band is the thing that you need to worry about,
No,
but
no.
I think about this a lot, especially with kids. Like the type of kids TV shows. I'm sure I haven't watched a lot of them, but I'm sure they're riddled with soft talk, negations, projections, and like we have to be mindful of what we are consuming and what we are allowing our kids especially to consume. Do you have any good resources for parents? I think this is important. I know somebody in the Enlifted crew wrote a children's book.
Yes,
right?
Kristen Davis. She wrote a book around the entire Enlifted method for children. You can go to Amazon.com and you can find this abracadabra book that she wrote.
Link will be in the show notes.
Yeah, and support her and her illustrator, who's a really talented artist as well. And they integrated a lot of this teaching into the, I mean, a really, really positive, encouraging children's book. So the goal is that this is the first of many, so there'll be more than simply one. Although, nice. As my nephew has proven to me, you can read one book to a kid every single night. If it's a good book, they will ask you to read it. So so yeah, this is a good one. Check it out.
Yeah, pay attention to where you spend your energy and attention. So, last question: what is it that you are most excited about?
Ooh, most excited about. I am anticipating. Okay, we'll get real practical and then we'll go a little bit bigger. So the practical thing I'm anticipating is 2023 is the year that our business is going to be a machine. Like, I mean, a machine. We invested tens of thousands of dollars this past year, which is a lot for a small company of our size, into marketing, into working with some tremendous contractors who are really great at what they do. And we've built funnels, we've built a new course, we've built all sorts of things, and we're taking this thing and we're crafting into a business that's so solid in its foundation that it's the first time we've done this in the 3 years since we started the certification and the 7 years since we started this work. So that's really fun. And I think that ultimately will facilitate my greater anticipation, which is the Enlifted Festival, which you've seen a small preview of it here.
Yep.
And I see DJ, I see the stage, I see a beautiful farm somewhere where we can have, farm to table food,
raw
milk. We're going to have, it's all of it's people having a great time. It's people opening up their minds and their hearts. It's people eating real food. It's interacting with each other. It's listening to great music and partying. It's the whole, it is a representation of what it is, a physical representation of what it is that we do. Because so much of our life is online now. So when we get to do those types of things, we have this manifestation in real life of, I'm seeing hundreds of people, when this happens. And that's something I'm really looking forward to, because that in a lot of ways will be a sort of a coronation of the material, that it is made a massive impact on a lot of people. So yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, that's it.
Sounds like living the captain's lifestyle to me.
It sounds very much in line.
Good people,
yes.
real food, fun.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, Adam, thank you for coming on for round 2, the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Appreciate it.